Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, Episode 512, Truth and Power. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters, and today, I have Winky with me. I don't know if you could see him. Perhaps you could see part of his cone. He's got a cone around his head. Unfortunately, Winky recently attacked some turkeys, and the turkeys fought back, and he got injured. Also, I have Ambrosia, my cat, with me. So I have Winky the dog and Ambrosia the cat. One on each side of me, perhaps both out of camera range. Oh well, he might see a cat ear every once in a while, or as I said, part of a plastic cone around Winky's head. Anyway, so tonight I will continue with My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. Then it's on to Truth and Power. Here, I look at the overall structure of society and the imaginary territories and how we could do things differently. Today's show will feature background footage from Troubadour Trail, or Troubadour Trail. But anyway, this is in Girton. Also, later on, I'll continue with My Big Toe. It's just such a big book. I just need to take a little break from it. Troubadour Trail, or however you pronounce it, is in Girton, North Carolina. To get there, take Bear Wallow Mountain Road off of 74A in Girton. You go up until the dirt road turns back into a paved road at the crest of the mountain, or the crest of the ridge, rather. Anyway, here you pull off and park. Troubadour Trail is off to the right. It goes down a ways and then eventually back up, and eventually ending up in Blue Ridge Meadows. Some wonderful pasture land with some great views on top of a mountain. Also, Strawberry Gap Trail in Girton goes to the same place, the Blue Ridge Meadows. So, now, let's continue with My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. In some philosophic traditions, the idea of karma and reaping what you sow somewhat expresses this concept of a cumulative quality of being that can be improved by making prudent choices for the right reasons within your local reality. Flunked lessons, failure to learn, must be repeated in different forms until they are passed, until the entity gets it. Now, let's go to page 585 of My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. Understanding the space-time rule set that we have been discussing in terms of one overarching theory is what PMR physicists refer to as a toe. Theory of everything. They have been working on a little PMR toe for a long time, but are stymied because, among other things, they do not understand the big picture. They do not understand the nature of the larger reality of which the toe they seek is only a part. In fact, being unaware that a big toe exists limits them to searching exclusively for only a little toe. PMR, lower level rule set only. PMR scientists cannot find the little toe because the concepts they need to derive an understandable context wherein the little toe can be seen as one whole thing are found only within a big toe. Furthermore, because of the digital algorithmic properties of the PMR rule set, there may or may not be a little toe cast exclusively in terms of little toe logic. PMR mathematics. Now it is time for truth and power. Here we look at the structure of society, the imaginary territories, and how we could do things differently. Perhaps you should record this section. It might be important. Well, I guess it's important to me. Forming, well, one of the key reasons, one of the important reasons I exist, one of the purposes of my life, perhaps the main one, to promote the East Side imaginary territory. Sure, and that's one of the big reasons I do the show. Of course, I don't talk about it all the time on the Casey Waters show. I'm assuming the audience would quickly get bored of it. Imaginary territories. Who cares about your imaginings? What difference does it make? I got my own philosophy and religion. Well, everybody does, of course. And perhaps it is all irrelevant. But then again, I might be onto something. Well, sure. You have to look at what the imaginary territories are. Well, according to my imagination and my thinking, philosophy, etc. So yeah, this is going into some original ideas of mine. Sure. As I said, it's something I think about a lot. You know, it's one of the reasons I'm here. Yeah, I feel it's an important idea to promote. Perhaps an important idea for us all to promote. Perhaps we're all here for the same reason, and this might be a big part of it. So, why do I think that? Well, let's go back to the book, My Big Toe. Remember that Thomas Campbell was asserting that a non-physical matter reality and higher levels of existence beyond that, consciousness was the primary existence. Consciousness was reality. Sure. And then we are in a step below that in physical matter reality, where we think we're part of a physical environment, where the author asserts that our consciousness creates our environment, creates physical matter, our bodies, and so forth. So consciousness is fundamental, and learning is fundamental. That's why we're here. And we're evolving and growing. Growing towards what? Evolving towards what? Well, according to the author, it's to work with each other more, to be more loving, more compassionate, more understanding, generous, and so forth, sharing, kind, etc. Instead of just looking out after ourselves and being greedy and inconsiderate of other people. The author would say that was high entropy, where being loving and compassionate, generous, and sharing might be a more low entropy existence, where we're evolving towards, what our goal is. So our goal is to be more compassionate and loving. Well, if you step back, you look at many other religions, Buddhism, Christianity, and so on. Well, they pretty much all say the same thing. So, once again, I guess I'm on to something. So, moving on. Well, what are the imaginary territories? Well, let's summarize them, even though I do this often enough. Perhaps a lot of you all missed previous episodes or forgot. Anyway, so we got the East Side imaginary territory. East Side is just a very arbitrary name. You could call it whatever you like. You could give it a number or a letter or call it something else. Anyway, so the East Side imaginary territory, well, favors compassion, favors honesty, favors everyone learning, knowledge being something readily available to anyone, in any specialty, and especially knowledge about politics, economics, and ways people might be conned out of money, whether it's for working for a poverty wage or being conned by a health insurance company or a telemarketer. So consumers, everybody would be educated about this and empowered to do something about it if they fall victim to a scam. The East Side believes the government should have power to step in and so on and so on. So the East Side, as I said, favors honesty, compassion, and that's how they would seek out their life partners. They would seek out someone who's honest and compassionate, someone who has an agreeable personality to theirs, someone they could stay with for a long time, and all that good stuff. And so, the East Side believes in these things, believes in a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you help the poorest and the meekest among us, and you help them do better, well, then everyone will do better. Well, that sounds all fine and dandy. What does the West Side believe? Well, the West Side, once again, it's an arbitrary name. You can call it a letter or color or whatever you want to. Anyway, so the West Side believes in deception, where everybody's out for themselves. And if you need to deceive to get ahead, well, that's okay. It's even encouraged. Deceive your coworkers to get promoted. Why not? Well, the East Side would really frown upon that, perhaps almost considering it a crime, where the West Side would consider it a sign of strength and intelligence. You knew how to con your coworkers to get that promotion. Good for you. Perhaps your boss would appreciate it too, if your boss was a West Side person as well. So West Side encourages wealth concentration. Everybody's out for themselves. And so the people who get deceived and who become victims to scams and cons, well, there's not much recourse for them. The West Side doesn't encourage a government branch to look out people who are victims of scams because, well, I guess the government would encourage scams. Everybody's out for themselves. Survival of the fittest. And if you're not the fittest, well, perhaps you won't survive. But anyway, so the West Side, as I said, they believe in deception. They don't believe in much compassion or sharing or giving or sharing knowledge, especially about politics and how scams and things like that work and how to analyze things critically to detect if you're being ripped off. No, they the East Side encourages critical thinking, where the West Side, well, they might encourage it too, but for a different reason. They would encourage critical reasoning to find a better way to con someone and get ahead, where the East Side would encourage critical thinking to figure out if you're being conned and not to be conned. So with the West Side, everything's a big con game. Everybody's lying to each other, deceiving each other, trying to get ahead of each other. What about your life partner? Well, their values and their personality might not be that important. What's more important is how they look and their social status, position at work, and their position in society, etc. You gotta have someone who's gonna make you look good. That's all that matters. It's what's on the surface, the veneer, the outer appearance. Dress to impress. That's such a West Side saying. Oh, they believe it. They live by it. But it's just a shallow veneer, the dress. What's underneath is totally different. Where the East Side would say, dress as you want. Who cares if you look like a bum? It's on what's on the inside, which will shine through and everyone should readily recognize. Anyway, so that's how they work. And so the West Side people will probably go through a lot of different lifetime partners, and they would probably quickly tire of who they're with. If they started to lose money or social status, or they started to get ugly, bye-bye, on to someone new. Sure. The West Side encourages ephemeral pleasure, where the East Side encourages a more long-term strategy of pleasure. Sure. So, what does this all mean? Okay, now let's jump in and start plugging this into society and other things. So here we go. We're moving along here. Yeah, hopefully you got the record button going. It's because this stuff might be important, sure, and applicable. It might apply now in the present time and perhaps in the future as well. So, here we go. So the West Side consolidates power where the East Side distributes power. So, this is really important. So try to grab onto it and remember it. The West Side wants power in the hands of a few, perhaps in the hands of one, where the East Side wants power distributed equally, almost amongst everybody. So everything would have to be a group vote, I guess, on the East Side. And of course, the East Side would educate the voters and make sure they knew exactly what was at stake. And there'd be lots of time for debate and discussion and time to find the optimal solution, etc. Where the West Side would consolidate power amongst a few people, and they would decide and not really consult much with the people who their decisions would impact. They would just make their decisions and that's that. Anyway, but what is this power? It's more than just power, you know. This power includes knowledge that could be ever so precious and life-saving. And wealth as well. So the wealth comes with the power. And guess what? Even leisure, or at least perhaps quality leisure, would come with it. So the East Side wants everyone to have some degree of knowledge, wealth, and power and leisure, where the West Side wants just a few people to have power, knowledge, wealth, and leisure. Perhaps the West Side wants more people disillusioned. Perhaps the West Side feeds off our sadness, off of our disillusionment. Perhaps the more cynical we are, the more disillusioned we are, the more hopeless we are, the stronger the West Side is, and perhaps the happier the West Side is. Where the East Side might be happier when we're happier, when we feel content, when we feel hopeful, when we feel loved, and when we are loving. Sure, because we have wealth and leisure, at least a degree of it, and knowledge, and at least we have an equal chance to succeed. Where the West Side, the good chances to succeed are just for a few people. So the West Side uses deception, where the East Side uses truth. Sure, I was talking about that earlier. So, the West Side likes to concentrate wealth, while the East Side wants to distribute wealth. So, this isn't in terms of like communism where everyone has the same amount of money. No, not necessarily. Some people could have more money, and some people have less money on the East Side. It's just that wealth concentration doesn't go to an extreme. It doesn't get carried away. Perhaps there might be some kind of limits on it. Perhaps higher taxes as you get more wealthy. Something like that. Where the West Side would perhaps have lower taxes on higher wealth so wealth could concentrate more readily. Where the East Side would discourage wealth concentration and try to redistribute the wealth from the extremely wealthy to the extremely poor, and in the forms of social support programs and perhaps even direct cash distributions to poor people. A monthly support distribution to make sure everyone's okay. This would be critical, especially for those who don't work regularly. It could mean the difference between life and death, sure, or between a good existence and a horrible one. So, everyone needs support. Anyway, so, the East Side wants to unify everyone. The East Side expresses itself in terms of how we all got the same things going on. We all have the same problems or similar problems, and therefore similar solutions could be applied to many people. Solutions to what? Well, solutions to wealth concentration, solutions to a better government that supports poor people, solutions to more government regulation so we have a better environment, a better healthcare system, and so on. So the East Side wants to unify everyone on that theme and wants everyone to feel welcome and included and empowered, regardless of their race, their sexual orientation, their gender, age, disability, etc. Well, the West Side, he likes to conquer and divide. They might not necessarily use what I just described. Perhaps they'll conquer and divide along the lines of religion or other things. But they'll find some way to divide us, to pit some people against another group of people, to say we're good and they're bad, or you're bad and we're good. Somebody's bad, somebody's good. There's conflict going, and they want you to concentrate your energy and your mental thoughts into this conflict, into fighting whoever the enemy might be, and thus they could divide you, weaken you, and then perhaps seize power, seize wealth, sure, seize control, where everyone else suffers at the expense of a few. So that's kind of the default selection. So the West Side would use demagoguery in this conquer and dividing. but it's kind of the default selection of society, that's the way society is that there's a few people who have power and lots of people who are suffering. Why is that? Well, it's probably goes something like this. When people like me and others try to rally people and rise up and seize power and control and let everyone know that this is the best way to do things, to share knowledge, to share wealth, to have the government work for the poor, and to discourage wealth concentration, to have all religions be seen in the same light. I'll get to that in a little bit. Instead of one religion being inherently superior and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, the forces that be, the powers that be, the greedy ones, the people who have power will quickly crush such a revolution, revolt, or crush the ideas before they get spread. So I guess someone like me is the fool. I'm the one to be ridiculed. Go ahead and ridicule me. Sure, that's what the West Side would do. Yeah, I'm just talking nonsense. Of course I am. Sure, that's what they would have you believe, and my ideas would be quickly crushed and done away with. But actually, they're some of the most important ideas there are, and perhaps a reason why we exist. Perhaps the higher ups, the people in non physical matter reality, or God, or whatever, are running us as an experiment to see if we could actually, quote, do it on our own. If we could flip society and make society work for the poorest people instead of for a few wealthy people. I guess it's never truly been done in a successful way, and perhaps never will. But perhaps that's the goal of our whole existence. Perhaps that's what God is waiting for us to do. Anyway, moving along. So the East Side would teach knowledge of the economics, control and manipulation.
Casey Waters Show. Producer Casey Waters. Graphic editing Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, CaseyWaters2 at CaseyWaters.com.